Well, suffice to say that Vlad Tenev is a man on a mission to democratize finance. He says that access to the financial system, financial markets should not be limited to a select few, the privileged. It is the fundamental rights of each and every one of us. That's why Robinhood offers commission-free trading. Now, with blockchain technology maturing, I can say that, with cryptocurrencies and stablecoins gaining traction, tokenization too, perhaps some say on the cusp of a revolution, this is yet another opportunity to deepen financial inclusion for Robinhood. How does that vision look like? Well, here's the man who can answer all the questions. Mathematician, technologist, entrepreneur, and of course, co-founder of Robinhood. Vlad,
thank you.
Great to share the stage with you.
Thank you for not calling me TradFi. Not that there's anything wrong with TradFi, but it is a little bit of a insult around here, right?
It's okay. Right crowd. Let's start with tokenization. It does seem like a good starting point. Some say that we're on the cusp of a revolution. Some say this perhaps could be the new ETF moment for finance. I know you agree.
Yes. I think tokenization is like a freight train. It can't be stopped, and eventually it's going to eat the entire financial system. Now, the interesting thing about tokenization, actually, why don't we have a little bit of fun? How many people in the audience currently own a tokenized real-world asset? Okay.
Not many. I see about
10.
ten.
So this is the thing about tokenization. A lot of people have been talking about it for a very, very long time, but there's not a lot of action, right? So earlier this summer, we did a conference in the south of France where we actually launched stock tokens, which are tokenized versions of U.S. stocks. We rolled out to about 200 of the biggest names, and then we recently expanded that.
AI.
Well, we have the public stocks, which are a little bit more widespread, and we also, as you mentioned, tokenized SpaceX and OpenAI. We were the first to do that, and we gave those as a gift to our European customers. So if you sign up and onboard to our tokenized products in the EU, you'll get a nice gift of tokenized OpenAI and SpaceX. But actually, you guys missed something when you didn't raise your hands. How many own a stable coin? Okay, so that's a little bit more, right? That's maybe still probably 30% of people, which shows you we're early. But a stable coin is a tokenized real-world asset. And when I explain to people what's the benefit of tokenizing a stock when you have a traditional stock, I think sometimes it's helpful to reason by analogy and say, for stable coins in the US, we talk about it as this is going to be the best way to get exposure to US assets, and it's going to further what we call US dollar dominance abroad. There's a lot of talk about how the US dollar has been for a long time the global reserve asset, but there's a lot of competition. And one way that we'd like to stay ahead is by making it the default way to get access to dollars in the digital crypto realm. So that's why stable coins have been such a priority in the US. And if you do own a dollar stable coin, it's sort of like the most basic tokenized asset. So in the same way that stable coins are a bucket of dollars that you mint and burn tokens against, you can do that with stocks. You can do that with real estate and other real world assets, private stocks, which I really am interested in as well. And I think it'll become the default way to get exposure to US stocks outside the US. I think that's what makes it so exciting.
The question is, how soon will that happen? We talk about tokenizing real estate.
Yeah.
And Bloomberg ran a story today about how the Witkoffs had this idea of tokenizing President Trump's real estate. One, how feasible? How soon can that happen? And where do you go from there?
Yeah, tokenizing real estate mechanically looks very much like tokenizing a private company. You essentially buy, one property or a collection of properties in a company, then you tokenize that company, much like, you would tokenize a OpenAI or SpaceX.
It's not more complicated than tokenizing stocks when it comes to real estate. Is there greater complexity?
I mean, both of these things we've demonstrated, and in the case of stocks, it's live right now in the EU. So the only complexity remaining is really making sure that you have the appropriate licensure and the regulatory clarity in many jurisdictions. But I think that'll come. I think it started in Europe, but it'll expand to the rest of the world. And unfortunately, but realistically, US will probably be somewhat behind, definitely Europe, but US will probably be among the last economies to actually fully tokenize. But I think it's inevitable in the US as well.
When you have conversations with regulators, what are some of the outstanding concerns, key concerns when it comes to tokenization? Some perhaps have drawn, to perhaps Robinhood walking a tightrope when it comes to tokenization. Is there any basis for concern?
I think it depends on the asset. I think there's minor concerns, all the typical things, customer protection, what happens if the underlying deviates from the value of the token, and how do you reconcile that? But I think the biggest challenge in the US is that we actually have infrastructure that basically works. It's kind of like, in Asia, you have bullet trains that are very, very fast, and people have been asking for a very long time, why don't we have these fast trains in the US? Instead, we have trains that go medium speed. And, it's sort of like if you can get from point A to point B in 3 hours, getting there in 2 hours might not be worth the incremental investment. So in the same way, we have a financial system that works decently well in the US. Maybe you can't trade tokenized stocks, but, Robinhood's done a pretty decent job making stocks available to the mass market. We have, over 25 million customers in the US. Now, through our innovations in TradFi, you can trade 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. So you can't trade on Saturdays yet. We're looking to solve that. But essentially, you have a system that works capably. And so I think the incremental effort to go from that to fully tokenized is just going to take longer.
So look into the crystal ball. When will I be able to trade tokenized Apple, for instance, 24/7 globally?
Yeah. Globally is a big question. If you were in the EU and you onboarded to Robinhood, or there's a couple of other companies that are offering tokenized versions of US stocks, you can do it today. And the question really is, we have the technology to make that available on DeFi and all over the world, and it's just going to depend jurisdiction by jurisdiction on
if you would have to guess, 5 years?
When you would do it, I think most major markets will have some framework in the next 5 years. By the time it's sort of like near 100%, that might take a decade or more.
That's on tokenization. The other thing that is huge right now is the predictions markets. You came out to say that you've reached, 4 billion event contracts and 2 billion in the third quarter. What's driving the surge?
Yeah, I think, so to give context, we launched our prediction markets offering a little bit under a year ago with the US presidential election.
And on the back of that, your stocks rose tremendously.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you can attribute it just to prediction markets at that point. But yeah, we're in many businesses, right? We have a large retail cryptocurrency business. Obviously, as a result of the elections, the stock market did very, very well. And actually, because so many different assets responded so directly to the results of the election, it sort of illustrates the power of prediction markets as a technology. So you might have a thesis as an investor or trader that, if the Democrats or the Republicans win the election, it's going to affect prices in some way. But that thesis is indirect. You have to figure out, okay, how is it going to affect prices? And you see this a lot with company earnings. Maybe a company beats earnings, but there's something in the guidance that actually results in the stock going down. And so prediction markets allow you to very precisely monetize your point of view. So for the presidential election, maybe you don't know how, a Trump victory would have affected Bitcoin or other cryptos, but maybe you're confident that you would have a Trump victory. And you could make that trade and sort of like directly monetize what people believe is their unique intuition. So the elections did very well for Robinhood prediction markets. And a lot of people had skepticism about whether this would only be an election thing, whether it's like prediction markets are going to be relevant every 4 years, but not so much in between. And I think what we've demonstrated along with the other prediction markets platforms is that it's not just an election thing. It's really much bigger than that. And now we have prediction markets on sports, and American football and college football have been particularly popular there. You have prediction markets on culture. You have them on AI. I mean, one of the contracts we offer on Robinhood is what's going to be the best AI model. And, for me, this is very interesting because we have so many, just like the elections, AI is going to affect the economy. And if you have superior knowledge and you really understand the AI space, now we have products for you to trade that point of view and actually directly monetize it. So I'm excited. There was a report a couple of days ago that Robinhood prediction markets, this was a Piper Sandler report, was on a 200 million run rate after less than a year, which just shows that retail is super interested in these products.
But it's not without criticism, though, right? Some point to the blurring of lines between finance and gambling.
Yeah, for sure. There is definitely criticism. I think with a lot of innovations, and I think prediction markets, one thing hopefully we can all agree on is it's a big innovation. It's a change. People tend to compare it to what's been there before, right? The whole, the car is just a horseless carriage thing. So I think prediction markets has some similarities with traditional sports betting and gambling. There's also similarities with active trading in that they're exchange traded products that happen on exchanges. It also has some similarities to traditional media and news products because there's a lot of people that use prediction markets not to trade or speculate, but because they want to know who's going to win the election, what are people saying is the most likely thing to happen with the Fed rate cuts. And so there's a passive use case, which is just a source of information. So I don't think it's quite exactly any one of these three things, but some hybrid that has actually strong potential to transform all three of those massive industries.
You talked earlier about how you're in many businesses, right? How important will prediction markets be in the bigger scheme of things for Robinhood? And what kind of growth are you anticipating?
I mean, certainly looking backwards, it's been among the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing individual business lines. And I've talked a lot about how we have 9 business lines now that generate over 100 million in annual revenue. Prediction markets, and there are a couple of others, Bitstamp, have been waiting in the wings. And I would be very surprised if we're not up to a much larger number than that in the future. So I think it's interesting for the active trading space. We look at all of these assets as important. We look to be number one in all assets that we trade, including prediction markets. But we also, the long-term goal of Robinhood is for anyone, anywhere in the world to be able to keep all of their money and all of their assets on platform. That's what our MC, when he said financial super app, that's basically what he meant. It should be the home for all of your money. So we obviously want to compete for traders across all assets, but what we want to do for each individual customer is be the best, lowest cost, best user experience way to hold your assets whatever those assets may be. And I don't think 100% of the average person's assets are going to be in prediction markets, but there is going to be a small portion of the portfolio. If I had to guess, mid-single digit percent, something in that ballpark, that's going in and out more systematically to these discretionary trades, be it, prediction markets, options, futures, or even individual stocks can sometimes be in that bucket. We want to be the best place for that bucket, alongside the best place for your retirement, your passively managed investments, and your banking needs, which we're now rolling out Robinhood banking, and we have what I think is the best credit card, recently announced, over 450,000 cardholders. So ideally, we're the place where you can deposit your paycheck, you can have your savings with us at the highest possible APY, all of your investments and your retirement. And if you want to trade prediction markets or trade options and you have an actively managed portion of the portfolio, we think we can.
So a super app, a one-stop shop. I'll be remiss not to talk about cryptocurrencies. What a ride, right? I think Bitcoin is about 112,000, but we saw that sell-off recently where, I think $300,000, $300 billion were wiped out. I'm just wondering, you're going all in on cryptocurrencies. What exactly does that mean, and what are you looking at doing in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question. Probably your words, not mine. I'm going all in on everything. All in on everything. Big chip stack. I think that I don't know how controversial this would be to say with this audience, but when I say this with a more general audience, very controversial. I actually think cryptocurrency and traditional finance have been living in two separate worlds for a while, but they're going to fully merge. And we're talking about tokenized stocks and other real world assets. Stablecoin, which is an early form of this, a great example of this. I think that crypto technology has so many advantages over the traditional way we're doing things that in the future, there's going to be no distinction. It's kind of like how technology itself was viewed as a sector of the economy for a very long time. Still is, there's technology companies and everything else. I think crypto will go through a same transition where we're sort of like thinking about it in its own bucket, but eventually, everything will be on chain in some form or another, and the distinction will kind of disappear.
What do you make of how traditional finance, the likes of your NASDAQs and your S&Ps, how ready are they for what's coming?
I think that the challenge with traditional finance, particularly on the more infrastructure layer, is they have a lot of stakeholders. And if you think about where they generate the bulk of their revenues, it's not from, crypto-related initiatives or firms. And a lot of these stakeholders, because they're already quite big, are going to be resistant and slower to adopt technologies. They're going to be late adopters. They're going to wait until it's proven before adopting it. And I think that's why for us, we've had to do greater vertical integration than we would normally want to do in TradFi. We acquired Bitstamp. We have our own exchange. We're building our own chain because I don't think to be at the frontier of crypto that you can rely on traditional infrastructure providers. I think they'll get there eventually, but it'll take a very long time.
We have 38 seconds. We have not even managed to speak about AI. So just one question on AI. I know that you're big on this. How do we prepare for a world, an AI world, that's coming sooner than you think?
I've thought about this a lot, actually. I think that, first of all, we shouldn't be afraid. A lot of people get things wrong about AI. I mean, if you look at 1997, where AI first beat a chess grandmaster, Kasparov, in a game of chess. And at that point, we were like, it's over. No more chess. It's been beaten. Chess is bigger than ever. There's like twice as many grandmasters now than there were 10 years ago. The purses at these massive chess competitions are bigger than ever, probably 2 to 3 times as big. So it's like booming, even though it was one of the first things that was completely disrupted by AI. Andrei Karpathy had a nice thread last week about radiology. Like, radiology has never been bigger than it is now. There's still more demand for radiologists than supply. Wages are going up. And you ask people 10 years ago, when AI was first at or above human performance in these radiology scans, they would have told you, don't go to medical school to be a radiologist. That's like a bad career move. So I think for a lot of things, the big one right now, by the way, is software engineering. If I had to make a prediction, I think there would be more software engineers 10 years from now than there are today. Of course, they have to be conversant in the AI tools. And if you're not, you'll be at a big disadvantage. But I'm still very bullish on humans and human ingenuity. So I think the best thing to do is to start tinkering with these AI tools. I mean, it's like, if I watch my kids and how they use ChatGPT and Grok, I think that's the future. And the great thing about kids versus, old folks like me is they have time. I have existing things to do that are getting in the way of me tinkering with AI. So I really have to make an effort. I think that's the best way to do it. I think you should tinker. You should use Cursor. You should use Windsurf or what have you, Claude Code. Just build things, create things, and do it for fun. And I think that's the best way to future-proof your career.
Lots to mull over. Vlad Tenev, thanks so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.